Imagine a world teetering on the brink of annihilation. It's the height of the Cold War, 1960. A lone American pilot soars through the stratosphere at 70,000 feet, peering down on the vast, secretive expanse of the Soviet Union. His plane, a sleek, fragile marvel of engineering, captures images that could tip the balance of power. But in an instant, a missile streaks upward, exploding in a fireball that shatters the sky. The pilot ejects into enemy territory, his capture igniting a diplomatic firestorm that nearly derails global peace talks. This is the story of the U-2 Spyplane machine that drove the USSR to the edge of madness, exposing secrets while unraveling alliances. Welcome to Spyward Story. If you're hooked already, smash that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into history's most thrilling tech tales, and share this with a friend who loves Cold War intrigue. And hey, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let me know in the comments. The Cold War wasn't just a battle of ideologies, it was a shadow war of secrets, where knowing your enemy's next move could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, locked in a tense standoff. The Iron Curtain had fallen, dividing Europe, and whispers of nuclear Armageddon echoed through the halls of power. But here's the problem. America didn't know what was happening behind that curtain. Human spies, those brave souls slipping across borders with forged papers and hidden messages, were failing spectacularly. The USSR's iron grip on its borders, combined with ruthless counterintelligence from the KGB, made traditional espionage a deadly gamble. Agents were captured, tortured, or executed, their networks rolled up like old carpets. The CIA and military intelligence were flying blind, relying on defectors, intercepted radio chatter, and grainy photos from risky border flights. But these scraps weren't enough. Rumors swirled of massive Soviet bomber fleets, missile silos sprouting like weeds, and atomic tests shaking the earth. Was there a bomber gap? A missile gap? Without solid intel, paranoia festered. President Dwight D. Eisenhower knew the stakes. One miscalculation could spark World War III, when human spies faltered. Technology had to step in, and it revolutionized warfare forever. Enter the era of aerial reconnaissance, where the skies became the new frontier for espionage. Balloons had been tried massive, unwieldy things drifting over Soviet territory, with cameras dangling below, but they were unreliable, easily shot down or blown off course. Modified bombers like the RB-47 ventured near the borders, snapping photos from afar, but they couldn't penetrate deep into the heartland without risking all-out conflict. The US needed something radical, a plane that could fly so high it was untouchable, invisible to radars and beyond the reach of fighters or missiles. This wasn't just engineering, it was a desperate bid to pierce the veil of secrecy. The Cold War's intelligence vacuum had created a powder keg, and aerial tech was the match that could either ignite it or snuff it out. As tensions mounted with events like the Berlin blockade and the Korean War, the need for reliable overhead intel became urgent. The U.S. Air Force issued calls for proposals under codenames like Bald Eagle, seeking a reconnaissance aircraft that could cruise at 70,000 feet for thousands of miles. Competitors like Bell, Martin, and Fairchild submitted designs, but none captured the imagination like the unsolicited pitch from Lockheed's secretive Skunk Works division. At the helm was Clarence Kelly Johnson, an aeronautical genius whose mind worked like a precision engine. Johnson had already proven his mettle with icons like the P-38 Lightning and the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first jet fighter. Now, he envisioned a machine that defied convention, the U-2, codenamed Aquatone by the CIA. The design logic was pure brilliance wrapped in risk. Based loosely on the fuselage of the supersonic XF-104 starfighter, he stripped it down to essentials. No landing gear to save weight, just bicycle-like wheels that dropped away after takeoff, leaving the plane to belly land on skids. The wings? Enormous, glider-like spans stretching 80 feet, engineered for efficiency at extreme altitudes where the air is thin as a whisper. At 70,000 feet, the atmosphere is so rarefied that conventional jets would stall. Initially, the General Electric J-73, later upgraded, allowed it to soar like an eagle. The high-altitude concept was revolutionary, above the weather, beyond enemy reach, capturing crystal-clear photos with massive cameras like the HiCan-B, which could resolve details as small as a newspaper headline from miles up. But building it was a nightmare. The plane had to be feather-light, yet sturdy enough for 3,000-mile missions. Fuel boiled at low pressures, so special low-volatility kerosene was developed. The pilot, sealed in a pressure suit like an astronaut, breathed pure oxygen to survive the near vacuum. Test flights began in 1955 at Groom Lake Area 51, a remote Nevada site chosen for secrecy. The first U-2 lifted off unexpectedly during a taxi test, its wings generating so much lift it floated into the air. Pilots called it the Dragon Lady for its unforgiving handling. Stable at altitude, but a beast near the ground. Where the coffin corner loomed a narrow speed envelope where stalling or breaking the sound barrier could spell doom. The first bold flights pushed boundaries no aircraft had touched. In June 1956, after rigorous testing, the CIA's Detachment A deployed to Wiesbaden, West Germany. Pilots, former Air Force aces now sheep-dipped as civilians, underwent grueling training, high-altitude simulations, ejection drills, and cyanide pills for worst-case scenarios. On July 4, 1956, Independence Day, fittingly, the inaugural overflight launched. Pilot Karl Overstreet guided his U-2 over Poland and into Soviet airspace, photographing airfields and shipyards. The images were gold. No massive bomber fleets, easing fears of a gap. But the real audacity came days later. Missions penetrated deep, one reaching Leningrad's naval yards, another skirting Moscow. The U-2's cameras rolled film across vast swaths, revealing missile sites, troop movements, and nuclear facilities. These weren't just snapshots, they were strategic lifelines, debunking Soviet bluster and informing U.S. policy. Yet, each flight was a heart-pounding gamble. Pilots flew alone for up to 10 hours, battling hypoxia risks and the plane's quirks. One early mission saw a U-2 glide silently over the Black Sea. Its engine flamed out, only to restart at lower altitude. The bravery was immense. These were modern knights errant, armed with lenses instead of swords. The U-2 didn't just open Soviet secrets. It transformed intelligence from guesswork to precision, proving technology could outwit tyranny. But the Soviets weren't blind. From the very first overflight, their radars pinged the intruder, faint blip at impossible heights. PVO Strany, the Soviet Air Defense Command, scrambled MiG-15s and MiG-17s. But they topped out at 50,000 feet, clawing futilely at the sky. Anti-aircraft guns were useless. Missiles like the early S-25 Berkat couldn't reach. Frustration boiled in the Kremlin. Nikita Khrushchev, the bombastic premier, received reports of these ghost planes violating sovereign airspace. Protests were lodged privately through diplomatic channels. Eisenhower received notes decrying the intrusions, but publicly. Silence reigned. Admitting impotence would shatter the myth of Soviet invincibility. Instead, they accelerated defenses, radar upgrades, high-altitude interceptors like the MiG-19, and surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, in development. Early missions targeted Leningrad shipyards, where submarine construction hinted at naval ambitions. One U-2 flight in July 1956 lingered over the city for hours. Cameras worry, while below, radar operators tracked it helplessly. Soviet reactions escalated. Fighter pilots reported visual sightings. A silvery speck against the blue butt couldn't close. Interceptors strained engines, some suffering flameouts. The first real clash came indirectly. Peripheral flights near borders drew fire, but deep penetrations remained safe. By 1957, more missions probed. overflying Tomsk's nuclear plants, Semipalatinsk's test sites. Each incursion stung Soviet pride, fueling an arms race in defenses. Khrushchev vowed revenge, accelerating the SA-2 guideline missile capable of 80,000 feet. The U-2's impunity bred overconfidence in Washington. But in Moscow, it sowed seeds of fury, turning the skies into a battleground of shadows. Tensions simmered until that fateful day when the heavens no longer offered sanctuary. May 1, 1916, International Workers' Day in the USSR, a parade of might in Red Square. Francis Gary Powers, a seasoned U-2 pilot with 27 missions under his belt, lifted off from Peshawar, Pakistan, bound for Bodu, Norway, a 3,800-mile arc over Soviet heartland. His targets: missile bases at Sverdlovsk and Plesetsk, plutonium plants at Chelyabinsk. At 70,000 feet, Powers cruised serenely, the curvature of Earth visible. Below, Soviet radars locked on. Near Sverdlovsk, a battalion of SA-2 missiles waited. 14 were fired in a desperate barrage. One exploded behind the U-2, shrapnel severing the tail. The plane spun wildly. Powers ejected at 15,000 feet, his self-destruct failing. Captured by locals, then KGB, he faced interrogation. Khrushchev played his cards masterfully. Initially, the U.S. claimed a weather plane strayed off course, oxygen issues causing blackout. But on May 7th, Khrushchev revealed wreckage and Powers alive, exposing the lie. The fallout was catastrophic, an intelligence disaster of epic proportions. The Paris summit, Eisenhower, Khrushchev, Macmillan, de Gaulle collapsed in acrimony. Khrushchev stormed out, demanding apologies. Eisenhower refused. U-2 overflights halted, leaving an intel gap just as Cuban tensions brewed. Powers' trial in Moscow was a spectacle. Convicted of espionage, sentenced to 10 years, but swapped in 1962 for spy Rudolf Abel. The incident humiliated America, boosted Soviet propaganda, and hardened Cold War lines. It proved the skies weren't invincible, forcing a rethink. Altitude alone couldn't evade missiles forever. In the wake of this debacle, Kelly Johnson's genius shone anew. The U-2's downfall exposed a flaw: height was no longer enough against advancing SAMs. Johnson, ever the innovator, pivoted to a radical paradigm: speed over altitude. Missiles could climb high, but could they catch something screaming at Mach 3? At Skunk Works, under code Archangel, he conceived the Blackbird family, drawing from U-2 lessons lightweight materials. Extreme performance: Johnson envisioned a titanium beast, heat-resistant to 2,000 degrees. Radar-raving chines and J-58 engines sipping fuel at supersonic velocities. The A-12, then SR-71, would fly higher and 4 times faster, outrunning threats. This wasn't evolution, it was revolution, a new chapter in aerial espionage where velocity became the ultimate shield. As the U-2's era waned, the Blackbird's dawn promised to keep the secrets flowing, driving the Soviets even crazier in the endless game of cat and mouse. But the Blackbird wasn't just a promise, it was a thunderclap in the annals of aviation, a machine born from the ashes of the U-2's vulnerabilities. Ready to redefine the art of espionage at speeds that bent the laws of physics. From the secretive hangars of Lockheed's Skunk Works, the SR-71 Blackbird emerged as the world's fastest spy, a titanium-clad predator that laughed in the face of gravity and enemy fire. Its genesis traced back to 1958, when Kelly Johnson, fresh off the U-2 triumphed or tragedy, sketched the Archangel Series 12 iterations, culminating in the A-12 Oxcart for the CIA. But the Air Force wanted its own variant, the SR-71, strategic reconnaissance at its pinnacle. The first flight roared to life on December 22, 1964, at Palmdale, California. Test pilot Bob Gilliland coaxed the beast into the air, pushing it to Mach 1 on that maiden voyage. By July 1966, it shattered records. Mach 3.2 at 78,000 feet, a blistering 2,193 miles per hour, that still stands unchallenged for crewed air-breathing jets. But speed was only half the story. Cruising at over 80,000 feet higher than most missiles dreamed, the SR-71 operated in a realm where the sky bled into space. The cockpit pressurized like a spacesuit, pilots donning full-pressure gear to survive the thin air. The design philosophy was audacious: outrun everything. Traditional jets gulped air through compressors, but at Mach 3+, friction turns metal to mush. Johnson's solution: the Pratt & Whitney J58 engines, hybrid turbo ramjets that morphed mid-flight. At subsonic speeds, they acted like conventional turbofans, but as velocity climbed. Bypass doors shifted, channeling air directly into afterburners, ramjet mode kicking in at Mach 2.5. The hotter, the better. Inlet spikes adjusted automatically, compressing supersonic air into subsonic flows, generating 80% thrust from ram effect alone. Titanium skin, 93% of the airframe. Withstood 600-degree surface temps. Painted black for heat, dissipation, and stealth. Radar-absorbing chines and canted tails scattered signals, reducing cross-section to that of a small plane. Fuel: JP-7, so inert it wouldn't ignite with a match, leaking from seams on the ground, but sealing as heat expanded panels. The Blackbird wasn't built. It was forged in secrecy, assembled in Burbank under tarps, flown to Area 51 for tests where UFO sightings spiked locals mistaking fiery takeoffs for aliens. Crews dubbed it Habu after Okinawa's venomous snake, a fitting moniker for a plane that struck unseen and vanished. The SR-71's debut missions sent shockwaves through enemy radar rooms where operators stared at blips that defied reality. Radar said, "This can't be possible," muttered Soviet technicians as faint echoes flickered on screens. Early sorties in 1966 tested the water's peripheral flights along the Iron Curtain, skimming borders without crossing. But the ghosts were real. One 1967 mission over the Middle East clocked a ghost signal on Egyptian radars. A streak at Mach 3, gone before interceptors scrambled. The confusion was palpable. North Vietnamese operators, hardened by U-2 incursions, now faced phantoms. During initial Vietnam ops from Kadena Air Base, Okinawa, named Black Shield, the Blackbird's radar signature was a whisper, often dismissed as anomalies. "It's a glitch," they'd say, until photos of Hanoi defenses landed on Pentagon desks. Soviet advisors in Hanoi scratched heads. Their P-18 spoon rest radars picked up fleeting contacts, but tracking was futile. The SR-71's electronic countermeasures sweet-jammed frequencies, while its speed blurred Doppler returns. Pilots like Major Jerry O'Malley recounted post-mission briefs. "We'd see the radar paint us, then we'd throttle, up poof, vanished." Enemy confusion bred paranoia. In 1968, a Blackbird overflew North Korea after the USS Pueblo seizure. Pyongyang's radars lit up like Christmas, but the plane was untouchable, its ghost signals fueling rumors of American sorcery. The Soviets, monitoring via proxies, poured resources into upgrades. Voronezh radars for better high-speed tracking, but the Blackbird's elusiveness persisted. It wasn't invisibility. Was inevitability. Mach 3 meant crossing horizons before reactions formed. This spectral dance drove defenses mad, forcing adversaries to question their tech, their eyes, their sanity. Yet, the ultimate test came in the fiery skies over Vietnam, where thousands of missiles hungered for a kill, but the Blackbird claimed 0 victims. From March 1968 to April 1972, SR-71s flew 145 sorties over North Vietnam and Laos, dodging a hail of SA-2 guidelines. Over 800 fired in futile barrages. The mantra? Speed is life. One infamous incident. October 1968, pilot Gil Bertelsen and RSO Butch Sheffield streaked over Hanoi at Mach 3.1, 82,000 feet. Below, SAM sites erupted 6 missiles, climbing like vengeful serpents. But the Blackbird's defensive systems officer monitored the threat scope. Radar locks flickered. ECM pods wailed electronic screams, jamming guidance. Bertelsen pushed throttles. The plane surged to Mach 3.3, outpacing the SAM's Mach 3.5 climb, but in a shallower arc. Missiles peaked at 100,000 feet, detonating harmlessly behind. "We felt the thumps," Sheffield later said, "but it was like swatting flies." Another close call. August 26, 1981, post-Vietnam, but emblematic. Over the DMZ with North Korea, 2 SA-5 Gammon missiles launched, but the SR-71 evaded effortlessly. In Vietnam, the pattern repeated. Hanoi's Fansong radars acquired briefly, but closure rates were impossible. The Blackbird's evasion. Pure velocity turning radius at speed was 100 miles, but straight-line sprints left pursuers in dust. No hits, no losses. The plane's only wounds were from its own ferocity. Like inlet unstarts, causing violent yaws, corrected by autopilot. Vietnamese gunners fired blindly, wasting ordnance, their frustration boiling into myths of invincible Yankee devils. The SR-71's impunity wasn't luck, 'twas engineering triumph, proving speed trumped missiles in the deadly ballet of aerial warfare. The Soviets, stung by this aerial insolence, unleashed an interceptor arms race, birthing MiG programs that chased shadows but grasped air. The MiG-25 Foxbat, conceived in the late 1950s amid U-2 fears, but accelerated by Blackbird intel leaks. First flew in 1964. Beyond evasion, the Blackbird's espionage pierced fails. Its missions wielding strategic thunder that reshaped battlefields and policies. Sensors crammed in bays. Technical objective cameras, TOC, snapping 100,000 square miles per hour at 2-foot resolution. Ellen gear, hoovering signals. Side-looking airborne radar, SLAR mapping through clouds. In Vietnam, SR-71s pinpointed SAM sites, troop concentrations, supply routes intel feeding B-52 strikes, averting ambushes. One 1969 mission over Laos exposed Pathet Lao bases, enabling precision bombings that disrupted Ho Chi Minh Trail logistics. Immediate results: reduced enemy offensives, saved American lives. Over North Korea, post-Hueblo, Blackbirds monitored missile tests, naval deployments data informing Nixon's détente. In the 1973 Yom Kippur War, SR-71s from Mildenhall, UK, overflew Sinai, revealing Egyptian advances. Photos rushed to Kissinger, bolstering ceasefire talks. Cuban ops in the 1980s exposed Soviet brigade buildups, averting escalations along Soviet coasts. Barents Sea missions tracked submarine fleets' Kola Peninsula yards, Delta-class boomers vital for NATO deterrence. One sortie in 1987 imaged a Typhoon sub-launch, confirming SLBM ranges. The strategic ripple, no missile gaps, calibrated arms control prevented miscalculations. Bases identified in Iraq pre-Desert Storm, Libya, 1986 raids the Blackbird's eyes guided Tomahawks. Its impact, priceless intel, zero provocations, a silent guardian in the nuclear shadow. But what if it delved deeper, probing the Soviet heartland's forbidden depths? The analysis tantalizes, risk versus reward in a what-if abyss. Officially, SR-71s skirted border-steep penetrations, vetoed post powers to avoid diplomatic nukes. Imagine a rogue mission over Moscow. Mach 3 ingress, snapping Kremlin silos. But SAM Battalion's S-300s by 1980s saturate skies. Speed saves, but a lucky hit. Debris rains. Pilot captures echoes of 1960, derailing summits, igniting hot war. Rewards unmasking ICBM fields, like those near Perm, verifying treaties, exposing bluffs. But risks, tower, escalation to DEFCON 1. Soviet retaliation via proxies, like arming Vietnam, heavier. Fuel constraints limited range 3,500 miles unrefueled, needing tankers vulnerable near borders. engine unstarts at critical moments could doom. Navigation errors stray into kill zones. What if simulations in war games showed 90% survival, but that 10%? Catastrophic. Benefits: real-time intel satellites couldn't match cloud-piercing radar. Flexible routing. Yet satellites like KH-11 emerged safer, cheaper. The Blackbird's restraint amplified its myth. Untouchable because untested fully. In hindsight, periphery-suffice deep dives might have unraveled the fragile piece. As threats evolved, the SR-71 bowed out in 1998. Its legacy paving skies for drones and orbitals, where machines, not men, now dance with danger in the eternal spy game. As threats evolved, the SR-71 bowed out in 1998. Its legacy paving skies for drones and orbitals, where machines, not men, now dance with danger in the eternal spy game. But before we close the hangar doors on this era, let's soar into the showdown that redefined. In the high-stakes game of global espionage, the skies and the stars themselves became the ultimate battleground. This is the story of two titans of reconnaissance, the silent orbiting satellite versus the swift, audacious spy plane. A clash between predictable precision and on-demand agility. Imagine the height of the Cold War. Spy satellites, like the legendary KH-11 cannon, revolutionized intelligence gathering. Launched hundreds of miles into low Earth orbit, they became silent sentinels, circling the planet on predictable paths. From space, they could resolve details on the ground finer than a meter, debunking Soviet military myths and verifying arms treaties. Their advantages were clear. They were practically invulnerable. No surface-to-air missile could touch them, and they could operate for years, beaming back data from above. Once the massive initial cost of launch was covered, they were relatively cheap to run, but there was a catch. Their orbits were fixed. A satellite might pass over a critical hotspot only every 90 minutes. If clouds rolled in or the target moved, you were blind until the next pass. There were no reroutes, no lingering for a better look. This predictability became a weakness. Adversaries like North Korea learned to time their secret activities. Like missile tests, to perfectly avoid the watchful eye of a passing U.S. satellite. Enter the spy plane. Aircraft like the U-2 and the SR-71 Blackbird were the embodiment of flexibility. They could be deployed at a moment's notice, change course mid-mission, and loiter over targets for hours. Need immediate intel on a brewing crisis? You could scramble a Blackbird from a base in Okinawa. Have it streak across a hostile border at over 3 times the speed of sound and deliver physical photos before lunchtime. Flying closer to the action, their advanced sensors, like synthetic aperture radar, could cut through bad weather and capture details satellites often missed, like heat signatures or faint electronic signals. During the Vietnam War, SR-71s outran hundreds of missiles to deliver pinpoint intelligence. In the 1973 Yom Kippur War, their battlefield snapshots directly informed Henry Kissinger's high-stakes diplomacy. The pros were undeniable: unmatched adaptability and the human element. A pilot could improvise, dodge new threats, and focus on unexpected developments. Of course, the cons were just as stark. It was incredibly risky. Planes could be shot down, creating international incidents like the capture of U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers. Each flight was wildly expensive, and they were still dependent on weather and refueling tankers. But in complex situations, like tracking insurgents or monitoring urban warfare, planes excelled where satellites couldn't. Just look at the Chinese balloon incident in 2023. While satellites got glimpses, it was a U-2 that flew right up to it, giving analysts a detailed look at its antennas and solar panels. Essentially, satellites offered incredible breadth, but planes delivered crucial depth. This dynamic forced a strategic shift. As satellite technology and GPS matured, they took the lead for long-term strategic intelligence. But spy planes retained their vital edge for tactical, time-sensitive missions, balance that still defines modern warfare. So what happened to the undisputed king of spy planes, the SR-71 Blackbird? Its retirement is often shrouded in myth, with whispers of a top-secret successor called Aurora, or the simple idea that satellites made it obsolete. The real story is far more down-to-earth. It was about budgets, politics, and changing priorities. In 1989, the U.S. Air Force officially pulled the plug. The stated reason was cost. The program's annual price tag had swelled to over $260 million. The exotic JP-7 fuel and specialized maintenance for its titanium body were devouring funds. General Larry Welch, the Air Force Chief of Staff at the time, argued fiercely on Capitol Hill that the Blackbird couldn't fight or drop bombs, and that the money was better spent on the new B-2 stealth bomber. The top brass at Strategic Air Command agreed. They saw reconnaissance as secondary to their primary nuclear mission. Why fund a fleet of expensive spy planes when satellites seem to offer a redundant capability? Post-Cold War budget cuts sealed its fate. Ben Rich, the legendary head of Lockheed Skunk Works, who helped create the SR-71, called the cost arguments bogus, claiming the numbers were massively inflated. But Congress bought the official story. It wasn't a failure of technology. The Blackbird could still outrun anything sent against it. Even today, but a victim of fiscal reality and political infighting. The plane was briefly reactivated in the 90s for operations in the Gulf, proving its worth once again. But by 1998, with cheaper unmanned drones like the RQ for Global Hawk on the horizon, the SR-71 was grounded for good, defeated not by an enemy missile, but by accountants in Washington. But let's zoom out. The impact of these high-flying spies on history is immense. The silent war waged by planes like the U-2 and SR-71, fought with cameras and radar, literally changed the world. Early U-2 flights over the Soviet Union debunked the so-called bomber gap, revealing that the Declassified Soviet air fleet was far smaller than U.S. intelligence feared. This crucial information calmed nerves in the White House and directly informed arms control talks. Then, in October 1962, it was a U-2 that captured the photos of Soviet missile silos in Cuba. That evidence triggered the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it also provided the undeniable proof President Kennedy needed to justify his naval blockade, allowing him to stare down Khrushchev without firing a shot. The SR-71 took this a step further. Over its career, it flew more than 3,500 operational sorties, mapping enemy defenses from Vietnam to North Korea and monitoring Soviet submarine activity. This intelligence allowed military planners to disrupt supply lines, anticipate troop movements, and, most importantly, reduce the chance of miscalculation. When both sides knew they were being watched, the temptation for a surprise attack diminished, creating a fragile stability. But this came at a cost. Over 200 U.S. airmen were lost on these peripheral reconnaissance missions, their sacrifices often buried in classified files for decades. Economically, the program spurred incredible innovation. The titanium fabrication techniques developed for the Blackbird revolutionized the entire aviation industry, while the pressure suits designed for U-2 pilots paved the way for NASA's astronauts. These planes weren't just tools of war. They were instruments of foresight that helped steer the world away from the brink. So, in a world of drone swarms and vast satellite constellations, is there still a need for winged spies? Absolutely. The mission has just evolved. That Cold War relic, the U-2, is still flying today at 70,000 feet. Now upgraded with advanced radar and even artificial intelligence co-pilots, it patrols borders, sniffs for nuclear activity in North Korea, and even helps track cartel movements. While drones like the Global Hawk can stay airborne for longer, the U-2 still offers the critical judgment of a human pilot in complex, electronically jammed environments. The spirit of the SR-71 lives on in rumors of its successor. The SR-72, a hypersonic, unmanned son of Blackbird designed for rapid strike capabilities. Today's threats are hybrid and complex. Drones like the stealthy RQ-170 Sentinel operate over contested airspace, while fleets of Reapers hunt terrorists. Their low cost and disposability are a huge advantage. But manned planes still shine where others can't. With China and Russia developing weapons to shoot down satellites, having a plane like the U-2 that can quickly fill intelligence gaps is more important than ever. The future is a networked system where drones, planes, and satellites all work together seamlessly. But in an unpredictable world, the need for a fast, flexible, and survivable eye in the sky remains. The spyplane's relevance isn't diminished. It has simply evolved a vital piece in the eternal game of vigilance. As we look back on this epic of aerial espionage, from Kelly Johnson's revolutionary blueprints at Skunk Works to the dawn of the drone age, one timeless truth remains. The U-2 and SR-71 did more than just fly. They forged an invisible shield that helped keep the peace, proving that in the end, knowledge is the ultimate weapon. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history and technology.